A court found him guilty of silent prayer and ordered him to pay a nearly $12,000 fine.
You can now get convicted of a crime for silently praying. This is fine. We're going to break down one of the most dystopian examples of censorship I've seen in some time, and so much more in today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and across our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, a man in Britain was just convicted of a crime for silently praying outside of an abortion clinic. This story sounds too crazy to be true, but it is. Let's take a listen to a news report from the Christian news outlet EWTN.
In the United Kingdom, a British Army veteran has been found guilty of silently praying outside of an abortion clinic. In 2022, Adam Smith Connor was praying for his unborn son that died from abortion 2 decades prior. 2 police officers approached him, asked him what he was doing, and informed him he was violating the law. A court found him guilty of silent prayer and ordered him to pay a nearly $12,000 fine. In a press release, Smith Connor said, "Today, the court decided that certain thoughts, silent thoughts, can be illegal in the United Kingdom. That cannot be right. All I did was pray to God in the privacy of my own mind, and yet I stand convicted as a criminal." The Alliance Defending Freedom UK that defended Smith Connor says this is a legal turning point of immense proportions and blasted the neglect of basic freedoms of speech and thought.
So guys, the terms Orwellian and dystopian and all of that, often referencing the George Orwell novels 1984 or Animal Farm or these other futuristic dystopian societies where there's an authoritarian government and people are policed down to their thoughts and words. That's where phrases like thought crime or speech crime come from, or thought police. All of that is incredibly overused. I'm guilty of this myself. People just throw those kind of accusations or comparisons around like candy on Halloween, and it's a bit much. But this is a case where it is absolutely appropriate. This shit is absolutely Orwellian and dystopian, more so than anything I've seen in some time. I mean, how is this actually a real thing that actually happened in a supposedly free Western country? I'm not shocked by much these days, but this story did shock me. He just did nothing that in any sane society should be considered a crime. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't steal anybody's property. He didn't trespass. His silent prayer was not on the property of the abortion clinic. It's not like they can say he was trespassing or something. He wasn't. He didn't even shout at the women who were going in to get an abortion or try to convince them to change their mind. And obviously, I don't think that should necessarily be criminal, but he didn't even do that. He silently bowed his head in prayer, and the British government is treating that as a crime. To the British people who watch my show, I'm sorry, babe, I'm sure you're lovely, but this is why we fought that war, to be free of y'all and your dystopian authoritarian nonsense. I mean, this British man who's now got to pay a massive fine and has a criminal record is the real victim in the situation. There are no actual victims from what he did because, it was silent. Nobody was harmed or affected except him. In reality, the real criminals here are the people in the UK government who are making this kind of thing happen and writing these laws that criminalize this kind of silent thought. It literally is thought policing and oppressing people and violating their human rights. I mean, freedom of belief, freedom of association, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion are all fundamental human rights that are just being trampled all over by the government of the UK. And this isn't even the first time. It's not like we can just say this is one crazy story that happened. No, as Reason reports, multiple British people have been convicted of crimes for silently praying. Guys, it does not matter whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. That's not what this is about, right? This is about the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion and the freedom of thought. And the same thing would be true. I mean, this same logic could be used to criminalize pro-choice demonstrators silently thinking bad thoughts about the church outside of a church or something, or a pro-life event. I mean, it's just insane stuff that no sensible person should support. But you might be wondering, like, why should Americans really care? Of course, the UK is a little crazy. That's why we fought that war. That's why they caught that smoke and they took that big L. And yeah, why should we really care what happens to them? Well, one, I just care about what happens to our friends across the pond. But more importantly, I view the UK and other European nations as a good in an intellectual sense, but disturbing in a more reality-based sense, example of what can happen in supposedly liberal democracies, free, in quotes, I guess you have to put that, free countries in the West, when you don't have the strong protections and safeguards that many Americans take for granted here. If we didn't have a First Amendment that would block this kind of thing, any law criminalizing this sort of behavior would be struck down in the courts under First Amendment grounds. If we didn't have that protection, this kind of thing would absolutely happen here. Heck, we have a vice presidential nominee who, Tim Walz on the Democratic side, who keeps falsely claiming that hate speech and misinformation are not protected by the First Amendment. And we have a Republican nominee, Donald Trump, who wants to punish media outlets when he doesn't like their reporting and keeps demonstrating he really has no respect for the freedom of the press. It's not really a stretch to think that if you're willing to cross those boundaries, you'd also be willing to criminalize people's thoughts. Of course, the First Amendment protects us from that fate, but only so long as it's enforced and upheld by both a faithful judicial system, which is under attack, particularly from the Democrats who want to pack the Supreme Court and rig the judicial branch and eliminate it as a meaningful check on executive and legislative power, and also if it's upheld by a culture of free speech. Ultimately, if we become a society where 80 or 90% of the population doesn't support free speech, the institutional checks and balances, the systemic guarantees, none of that will be good enough in the long run. If the people's values change, then it just becomes a question of when, not if, the legal checks and balances and protections are eroded. So the dystopia unfolding across the pond right now is not just something Americans who are supportive of the pro-life cause should care about. No, not anything like that. It's an ugly reminder to all Americans of the fate that could await us if we allow our First Amendment rights to be eroded away. But what do you guys think? Do you think we could end up in this disturbing kind of place one day in the US in our lifetimes, or do you think we're going to hold and be strong against this kind of censorship and dystopian stuff? Let me know what you think in the comments. I do take the time to read the comments every day, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And now, we've got to check in on the mainstream media, because one of their heroes just got absolutely destroyed on Bill Maher. Joe Scarborough used to be a Republican a long time ago, but now he's a reliable mouthpiece for kind of the establishment liberal perspective, or the Democratic, basically, like, establishment on MSNBC. And he was just on Real Time with Bill Maher over on HBO, who is a liberal, but is thoughtful and critical of his own side and pushes back a lot. And they just had this remarkable exchange that, to me, put on full display the kind of gaslighting we see from liberal MSNBC hosts, but then really revealed it for just how ignorant it truly is. Take a listen.
But it's just the attitude that I find scary, that they're far too willing to stifle freedoms, including speech, for the sake of safety or misinformation, sometimes, which is coming from everybody. It's, you know, no one has a monopoly on it. Or just power.
You're saying nobody
it's just
has
power.
a monopoly on it. Come on. That's some moral relativism right there.
I said nobody has a monopoly.
You said nobody has a monopoly on it, but that's like saying nobody has a monopoly on being a billionaire. He's got that monopoly up here. I mean, he's got more money than us. A lot more money than us. So,
I don't get the.
You don't get it?
I don't know what point you're making.
You're saying it's both sides, isn't it?
Well,
there is no doubt.
There's no misinformation.
There's some disinformation from the left, but comparing it to what Donald Trump spews out every day, every week, comparing it to what Elon Musk is spewing out, unfortunately, on X, you sound like Brett Stevens right now, with all due respect. It's a joke. That's a real time.
And you sound like him, who looks like Rachel Maddow.
You understand what I'm saying?
But I've never argued with that. I've never argued that of a false equivalency. I just said there is misinformation from both sides.
Well, sorry.
I lived through COVID. Don't tell me there wasn't misinformation.
But there's a difference.
So Bill Maher just ate Joe Scarborough's lunch. He ate him up. He cooked him because it is absurd to suggest that, oh, the left barely does misinformation. It's all just the evil MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Yeah, I will admit Trump says things regularly that are simply not true or are wildly speculative or have no basis in evidence. I mean, that's just kind of his thing. He's done it for a long time. I'm not a fan of it, and I've always criticized it. But to pretend that Democrats or the liberal media are somehow paragons of integrity and truth tellers and never spread false narratives or fake stories is to gaslight us. It is to insult our intelligence. It is to treat us as if we have been in a coma for the last 5 to 10 years, when on everything from the COVID pandemic and the efficacy of COVID vaccines and masks and lockdowns and school closures to the years of false or misleading narratives and stories about Russia controlling Trump that aired on his network, MSNBC. All of this and so much more. I mean, even that one was so extreme, the misinformation about Russia, that pollsters in 2018 reported that a majority of Democratic voters believed Putin had hacked the voting machines to change vote tallies to get Trump elected in 2016, something for which there is absolutely no evidence. So they fear-porned Americans into believing totally made-up nonsense, and then they have the audacity to sit there and claim, oh, the misinformation doesn't come from our side. Yes, it does, babe. It absolutely does. You need to read the shirt that I'm wearing today. Your Delulu is showing, okay? Now available in the merch store. Check out the link in the bio. And guys, the whole misinformation coming from the left thing is not like something, oh, it just happened a few years ago. No, it's constantly happening. Many people on the left falsely claimed that the Trump assassination attempt in Butler was staged or a hoax or fake, including an anchor even on his own network, MSNBC. Joy Reid implied in a TikTok that there was something shady about his injury. It was fake or potentially, even though the FBI had confirmed that he received a gunshot wound. So they spread insane fake conspiracies about Trump all the time on his own frickin' network and his own network's hosts on social media. Oh, and don't forget the thing where a bunch of people made and believed and spread a just totally fake rumor about how J.D. Vance had had sex with a couch. Now, some people shared it as a meme or a joke, but I'm telling you, a lot of people actually think that that's real, that that happened. Because again, the left spreads misinformation too. You don't even have to take my word for it. This has gotten so bad that this year, the New York Times released a headline called "Left-Wing Misinformation is Having a Moment." When even the New York Times, which is heavily liberal in its bias, points out that left-wingers are spreading misinformation, you know it's bad. So I'm not defending, fringe conservative media that spreads a lot of fake or misleading stories. I'm not defending the many untrue things that come out of Donald Trump's mouth, but to look us in the eye and tell us that it's mostly just them and this isn't a both sides issue is gaslighting. And I simply won't stand for it. So I'm so glad that Bill Maher still had the common sense, even though he's a liberal, still had the common sense to grill Joe Scarborough on this and point out just what a fraudulent and dishonest argument he was making. But what do you think? Do you agree that it's only the right that spreads misinformation? Let me know in the comments below. And now we got to check in with the comedian Andrew Schulz, who hosts a really popular podcast on YouTube, who's getting a lot of blowback and even facing professional consequences after he dared interview former President Trump. So I don't know if you guys saw this interview. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw some clips from it. And this one particular moment where he made this joke about Barron Trump, I thought was so funny. And I thought more than anything, it was just audacious. I could not believe he sat across from the former president of the United States and said this.
So tell me this situation. Okay. Barron is 18. He's handsome. He's tall. Yeah. He's rich.
He's got the whole ball.
He's unleashed in New York City. Are you sure you want to reverse Roe v. Wade now?
I really like interviews like this. I think they show a different side of the candidate, and they don't all need to be hard-hitting, grilling, gotcha sit-downs. Trump has done plenty of those. So it was something different. It was something interesting. Some cool moments came from it, and I was just, ready to move on. But for Andrew Schulz, it wasn't that simple. He appears to be facing professional consequences for daring to platform Trump. Take a listen to this clip where he explains that the venue he was supposed to film his special in canceled just days before they were supposed to do it, hours after he published his interview with Donald Trump.
So it was an awesome interview and everybody loved it. And then a day later, Dove was like, oh, by the way, the venue you're going to shoot your special in canceled your shows.
No, damn it. I waited.
Within 3 hours.
Doug, after we interviewed him, before the episode comes out, he goes to the venue. Everybody leaves. It's on Schultz's special team. All of them have to go to the venue, check it out. I assume everything is good.
People flew in for this.
Oh, yeah. So we've had these venues locked in for months now, something like that. It's not like we might do it here. It's booked. It's ready to go. We're going on sale this week. We have the entire production team come out this is for the third time many of us are spotting the venue and looking at everything. We have the set design already curated. We're moving around seating plots, camera plot. It's ready to go. We're going on sale this week. And we get an email 3.5 hours out. After discussing with our board members, we don't think that it would be, there's email, you'll bring it up, but don't show any emails off. But it was BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music, which is a venue they've shot tons of specials in. And 3.5 hours after the interview, they canceled shows. So, yeah, let's see if we can show the thing. Read the exact email, because they're canceling my shows, but they're also begging Live Nation to not cancel future shows with them. They still want business, but they're just not this guy. Now, I don't know if it's a Trump interview, but the day before it came out, we were ready to go and we were going on sale this week. And 3.5 hours afterwards, we get this email. Yeah. First off, I want to thank you for thinking of BAM for Andrew Schultz's upcoming comedy show. We are always excited when promoters consider our space for their events. After some internal discussions with leadership, it was decided that BAM is not the right fit for this show at this time. That said, we really do appreciate you reaching out. We'd love to work with you in the future and for future events that might be a better match for BAM. So if anybody has a venue, if you've got a venue for us, that'd be really great. I'd really love to shoot this special, and that'd be really awesome.
The irony is this is your most personal special.
Yes.
It's not as political as that. It's you and your journey.
Yeah, but also what's interesting about it is that, again, they canceled it 3 hours after the interview came out. So before the liberal media spun it in liberals' favor. Yeah. So if they waited 2 days, they get the hero.
You're a darling
of the liberals.
You just got to send him, be like, I laughed in his face.
Yeah, so the point that Andrew makes there at the end is that actually the fallout from this interview was in many ways used against Trump. It was skewed by the liberal media, this particular clip where basically Schultz laughed in his face because Trump said something kind of funny where he says, I'm basically a truthful guy. So it's particularly insane that they're using this against him when it's not even clear that this was like a pro-Trump interview that helped him. It may have actually hurt him. It started a couple news cycles that weren't particularly favorable to the former president. But honestly, all of that's irrelevant. An artistic venue that prides itself on having a wide array of different voices and exhibits and personalities and shows should not be canceling comedians just days before they're supposed to deliver a special that's been planned just because they interviewed a former president. That's insane. That's totally intolerant and illiberal and close-minded. I mean, technically, it's their business. They can do with it what they want. I'm not saying what they're doing should be illegal, but I think they should face a lot of scrutiny for it, and people should punish them. And I guess it's theoretically possible that this was just a coincidence, but I find that very hard to believe, both with the timing and the fact that the statement that they sent in that email was like, oh, our values aren't aligned. What values? Okay, they mean political values, and that's not a coincidence. It's also so interesting to me that this backlash exists independent of the actual content of the special, which maybe they didn't know about, but they could have asked about before canceling him. Because as they mentioned on the clip from their podcast, it's not even going to be a political special. It's a personal special where he talks about his life. So even if you didn't agree with his politics, which by the way, aren't necessarily right-wing just because he interviewed somebody. I don't actually know Andrew Schultz's politics. They could be right-wing, but they're not just because he interviewed somebody. That's not how interviewing works. Anyway, the fact that you didn't even bother to inquire about the content of the special, because even if somebody's politics differ from yours, the values of the show presumably are what matter the most. They didn't even do any of that. They just caved. They probably are run by insane woke people inside the organization, if it's in Brooklyn, who threw a hissy fit and demanded that they be canceled, and the bosses caved to their young employees. That's my theory about what probably went down. But what makes this particularly ironic, and this was pointed out by the website Hollywood in Toto, is that BAM, the Brooklyn art place that was supposed to host Andrew Schultz, just for November coming up, has a whole exhibit planned about the censorship of art and about conservative cancel culture from decades ago, lamenting it and talking about artistic freedom and all this. But here they are, shutting down artists for the crime of talking to people they hate. It's just, the cognitive dissonance is unreal. Now, Andrew Schultz will be fine. He's hugely successful. He's got massive followings on social media and on YouTube and all that. And I bet he'll be able to find another venue. But it's more the directional element of this story and just the move to silo off into our own spaces. I mean, I worry about this attitude because I just don't want to live in an America 30 years from now where we have Democrat restaurants and Republican restaurants. We're really that divided that we can only be around or work with or associate with people with our same shared values. I mean, that's just kind of ridiculous in so many ways. And it's not the vision of an open-minded and mutually tolerant America that I want to live in. It's just not. But what do you guys think? Do you like Andrew Schultz? Did you watch his interview with Trump? And do you think he deserved to be canceled by a venue over it? Let me know in the comments. And now, it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this TikToker is openly bragging about being an authoritarian communist. She seems very normal and stable. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm a tanky.
Oh, guys. Tanky is like a derogatory term for an authoritarian communist who supports repressive authoritarian regimes. And she's like, yes, that's me. Girl, it's giving unhinged. I just cannot imagine an ideology like communism killing so many people in the 20th century and yet going on the internet and being like, yes, that's my man. But there's so much more coming up in this video.
Tanky is a silly made-up word. I'm not sure who taught the liberals this word, but I want to explain something to you. The type of state that I believe in would be a bottom-up structure where the people who have been most marginalized in our current state have the most authority in the next.
Okay, stop for a second. That might sound nice, giving authority to the people who didn't have it in the current system. It might sound nice at first glance, but if you actually think about it, it's kind of insane. I mean, she's openly saying she doesn't want equality. She doesn't want an open society where everyone gets an equal shot. She just wants to do inequality in the opposite direction. Basically, to invert or turn upside down the historical, structural oppression and imbalances and give the other people a turn to be the oppressors and oppress different groups of people. How exactly does that make you different than the segregationists, than the people who opposed women's suffrage, from the people who made it illegal to be gay? I mean, you're essentially advocating for just switching around and doing something similar to different groups. You might be the bad guy, babe. But maybe she doesn't mean anything crazy, and maybe she's actually going to turn this around and explain somehow something normal she's advocating for, right? Like, let's keep an open mind.
I believe in taking away the car keys of authority and giving it to everyone else. It is far more democratic than what we have in the United States.
Okay, I'm gonna let you finish, but we might need to do a little remedial lesson on what that word democratic means. Because if only some people have say over the society or the government and not others, that ain't democratic, babe. And just taking the power from one group and giving it to another, also not democratic. Your delulu is showing. But we actually haven't even watched the craziest part of this video yet, guys.
And that is what I advocate for. Authority is not inherently a bad thing. It matters who has the authority. Like, for instance, I do not believe that white people should be in the vanguard or in positions of authority.
Oh?
That historically and presently has not gone well.
Y'all, my expectations for TikTok are on the floor at this point, but sometimes I still hear and see things that shock me a little bit. And this was one of those things. White people should be banned from like being politicians or wielding power or anything because historically and currently that hasn't gone well. Babe, what? Do you hear yourself? You're literally advocating for reverse Jim Crow. It is actually demented and evil to deprive individuals of rights or opportunities because of the actions of some nebulous collective that they didn't choose to belong to. I mean, what you're saying is no different than saying Muslims should lose their rights because a few Muslims committed an attack on society. This is the logic of the racists and the bigots, the people you think you're fighting against. And there's nothing more annoying to me than a self-hating woke white person, really. I mean, they're not going to pick you. They're still going to hate all white people, your leftist comrades. Like, this isn't going to mark you as special or different, babe. It's just not. Now, the final bit of this video is where things get actually kind of frightening.
And I believe in liberation by any means necessary. You do not get liberation by saying please. I hope this helps.
So, if this was supposed to make us more sympathetic to the tankies, it did not have that effect. In fact, it basically confirmed my exact suspicion that I had about these people, that they are deranged. I mean, what she says there at the end is code language. Liberation by any means necessary. She's saying she supports terrorism. I'm not exaggerating. That's the kind of thing that, for example, the people who argue the October 7 attacks were justified will say. Liberation by any means necessary, including slaughtering women and children and kidnapping innocent people. It's actually evil, violates kindergarten level morality of two wrongs don't make a right, and tramples all over and just rips up and throws away the teachings of actual successful social justice activists like Martin Luther King Jr., who always advocated for nonviolence and who inspired a radical social change in just decades. But this is where that extreme ideology takes you, and it's really scary and frightening stuff that is unfortunately somehow allowed to spread all over TikTok. Yet my takes, like daring to say that Zer pronouns are not valid or whatever, that will get flagged and taken down as hate speech. But all this is totally fine. Once again, parents out there, make sure you know what your kids are watching online so they don't end up tankies on the internet. Let me know what you think of this crazy video in the comments below, and do hit that like button while you're at it. And now, I'll wrap up today's show by reading a few of your comments from the last episode. One person writes, "It's so sad we went from, let's stop mocking obese people because obesity is not easy to tackle, to beautiful at any size, you fat phobe." I agree completely. I mean, I do advocate the first approach. I do not support fat shaming or bullying, but so much of what's going wrong in our society is pendulum swinging too far to opposite extremes, and the fat phobia discourse is no different. Another person writes, "As a practitioner of medicine, I see this daily when performing clinic hours. Americans are delusional when it comes to weight. I have had so many, generally female, complain when I mention that losing weight would be a major contributor to a healthier life. Sadly, people do not realize that the truth does not care about your feelings. As doctors, it is our duty to be honest, and I will never lie to a patient to keep their delusions going." Yeah, shout out to you for being real and honest with people. I mean, you have to be compassionate and kind and polite, and I'm sure that you were, but affirming delusions that are hurting people's health isn't kind, actually. I completely agree. Another person writes, "I call some of what these ladies are saying toxic body positivity. There is such a thing. Body positivity, in my opinion, allows you to maybe take care of yourself without ending up with an ED. You can love yourself as you are and take care of yourself as well. Thanks." I mean, look, if that was all body positivity movement really entailed, I'd have no issue with it. I just think it's become a lot more than that, at least many of its loudest advocates online. Another person says, we eat a ton of ground turkey and chicken thighs in our home. We live in Southeast Texas, and brown rice, fresh veggies, etc. And it really isn't more expensive to eat healthy if you shop the ads and buy the fresh produce/meat that's on sale that week. We have 2 diabetics in our home and had no choice but to eat as healthy as possible. No privilege here. Single mom on disability that lives with her senior parents with fixed incomes and a mortgage/bills like the rest of America. Plus, we are raising a 15-year-old boy that eats us out of house and home, so you just have to make eating healthy a priority. Thanks for making this video a priority, Brad. We all love you in our home. Wow, thank you so much, and I'm so glad you guys enjoy my content. I always love it when like families or couples all enjoy my content. I think that's so cool. I really find it amazing. But no, you're exactly right. I'm not saying it's super easy to eat healthy on a budget, but it is possible. And if people like you can do it, so can a lot of these people who don't have half as much on their plate. Oops, I didn't even mean that as a pun. Another person says, I crushed my foot 10 years ago. I have put on weight, 190 to 250, but I can't stand when people glorify being overweight. You're much more likely to have health complications and other issues. I'm working hard now at 46 to lose the weight. There's nothing good about being overweight, nothing that makes you more appealing. Let's all be realistic again. This denial and hypocrisy running rampant through today's society is sad. Thanks. Good for you. And I feel for you. I'm sure it's very difficult when you have injuries or disabilities to maintain a healthy weight, but you're doing your best and keep it up. Another person says, a quote from me, show your ass in 4K. LOL, Brad, you're a king. I'm weak. Yeah, I don't know if anybody said that or if I came up with it myself. Sometimes I don't want to take credit for catchphrases or whatever because sometimes I heard them somewhere and just stored them in the back of my mind. And then I think I said it and I was original, but actually I'm not. So that might be one of those. I don't know if I can actually claim credit. Another person says, I hate this plus size narrative. I am plus size. Plus size is XL. I have large/XL European size. This is not XL. This is way more. This is obese. Anyways, keep on. Great job. Love you, man. You make the internet a way more tolerable place. Well, thank you for being a subscriber and following and for your support. And I agree. The plus size thing makes it sound like, oh, I'm just not a size 5 or whatever. But sometimes plus size does not describe accurately the people we are talking about. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go, and do comment with your thoughts. I love reading the comments and hearing what you guys have to say, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely read it on tomorrow's show. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.